All right, Ollie, thanks for joining me. We're live. Hey, let's start. I'll give you the floor first. Why don't you introduce yourself, and then I'm curious of your origin story, right? I know we talked about it a little bit. You help coach people to overcome their anxiety. So I'm just kind of curious what led you down this path and why um, you're coaching people to overcome their anxiety.
Yeah, so my name's Olly. I've been helping young adults suffering with anxiety for about a year now. The main reason is because I went through it myself. I mean, back when I was 18 years old, I had a crazy experience. Prior to this experience, if somebody told me that how they had anxiety or depression, I kind of tell them just grow up. But then, I was hit hard, like a train by it. Like I say, like karma's a real thing. And then, yeah, I went through everything myself. And when I realised how kind of serious and how brutal this can be, I was taken aback. I went on a massive journey. There was points in the day where, well, for 2 days, I didn't want to leave my room because I just felt so kind of scared of the world outside. It was really horrible. But I was kind of relentless to kind of keep going. And fast forward, I think, till I was about 22 years old, I was flying to Italy with my girlfriend. And it was that point when I realised, like, oh, like if I can go from kind of where I was to here, literally anybody can. It's not just luck. Like there is a recipe to do it. There is a formula to go from one point A to point B. And when I realised I kind of had that like revolution and had all the knowledge behind it, I was like, I've got to help people who were in the same position as me. And that kind of fast forward a little bit on to when I was about 22, or like 6 months after I turned 22. That's when I was like, okay, I need to start helping people.
So you're talking about your experience specifically. So how did you go from like not being anxious at all or having anxiety to suddenly all of a sudden going through anxiety? Can you speak to that event a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, it was crazy. I went from kind of having the best summer of my life. So, like, I was going gym, kind of with all my friends, just enjoying life. And this when I was about 18 years old. So it's in 2018. And for about 2 years, about a year and a half, me and my friends kind of like dabbled in it. Was getting some weed, like as kind of young kids do, like teenagers do, like we're smoking weed and stuff, and just messing about really. But then the whole summer, like we're out every single day, just enjoying ourselves and having literally the best days. I remember thinking in my head like these are 10 out of 10 days every single day. Like it was ridiculous. But there was one time, and this is kind of when the book comes in. When I started, this is the first story I wrote about. So we did weed brownies. So I've done weed brownies before at this point, and I was like, yeah, it was really fun. I felt really good, etc. So my friend calls me and goes like, do you want to do them again? We've got kind of weed we can do all this stuff. So I'm like, okay, cool, six sounds like a good night. So I go over, start baking them because I was like self-proclaimed head chef. So I'm baking them up and stuff. We make them, and I was like, kind of, I don't know if you've ever done it before, but you kind of think, have I butchered this? Like, have I done it right? So I'm thinking,
Hmm.
okay, something must have gone wrong. So I was like, right, fuck it, I'm just gonna put all the chuck the weed in, we'll mix it with the butter. So I chucked everything in. So I've had three, and my mates had two, and my other mates had half of one. And as we go on about the night, we go for a walk around where we live, and 40 minutes goes by, and nothing's really happening, and then boom, it hits like a train, and all of a sudden I started to like, I'm kind of like, if this gets any more intense, like this can be too much. And at this point, I don't know if I can swear. Can I swear on this or
Yeah, yeah,
we
yeah.
leave
Go
that?
for it.
Yeah. So I'm like, at this point, like I'm shitting myself because I'm like, this is too much. But I've eaten everything already. It's not like when you smoke it, you can kind of stop it. It's like you've eaten it. You're in for the ride now. You've got to ride the storm. So it gets to the point where I start convincing myself that the outside of the sky is my brain. Like, so I'm looking at the sky and I'm like, I'm inside my brain. And it sounds so bizarre, but in that point, all rationale has really left your mind, so you really believe it. So I'm looking around, I'm starting to panic now. I was like, right, this is so weird. And my coping mechanism before when something like this happened was just, talk yourself through it. Like I'm safe, I'm fine. And it's obviously like it's not true, but I couldn't really do this because rationale had left. All these rational kind of thoughts were just getting absolutely obliterated by what was happening. And then it got to the point where I would walk, say, 4 steps, and then I'd forget the last 2 steps. So it felt like I was teleporting, like going dum dum dum. I was completely lost where I was, etc. Like it was so bad. Anyway, so my friend, we started to walk back. So my friends walked me back, and honestly, if they weren't there, I would have been completely lost in this town. I've spent the whole summer in this town, but the map and the layout in my head of what it was just gone. So we were back to my friend's house. I'd stayed there so many times. And we were kind of in there. I'm just now like it's getting worse. Like I call it like level 3, level 4. We'll get to like level 5. And I was sitting there. It felt like when I closed my eyes, it felt like I was on a rocking ship at the theme park. And the longer I closed my eyes, the more it swung left to right and the more aggressive it got. So I was like, right, I can't fall asleep. That's not going to work. So then I start feeling really sick, and I'm wandering around my mate's house, and I'm completely lost. I've stayed in this house for so long, and I just can't envision anything outside of it or where I am. It was horrible. So I start panicking again. And then I go to the toilets. My friend finally finds me, directs to the toilets, and I'm just projectile vomiting. And it was just so bad. And then so I was like, right. I was like, I don't want to call the ambulance or anything, because I remember thinking back to all the clips I used to see of people like they've done weed brownies and they call the ambulance and gone like, I think I'm dead, and everyone would laugh at them, and I was like, no, I'm actually going to become this guy. I am this guy. So I'm like kind of throwing up and stuff, and I was like, right, okay. So I looked at my phone, and I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to have to call the ambulance. Like, I'll just have to bite the bullet and take the bollock in for my parents, whatever. I need this to stop. I couldn't see the numbers on my phone. It was just too blurry. And I'm trying to type around, and I just couldn't get the number right. So I literally resorted to giving in, and I just couldn't even give in. I was just that bad. Anyway, so eventually I fall asleep, and it kind of goes. But there was one point where I was in the bathroom, and I couldn't envision anything outside the bathroom. It was like I was in this black void. Now, so what happens is the next day I feel really fragile, but I'm kind of fine. Like, I feel really weird and stuff, but it goes, and I continue having the best summer. But the reason I tell you the story is because this is what it links to when the first thing happened. So have the best summer, etc. But now it's my year 13, so it's my A-level year. And for everyone who doesn't know, in the UK, year 13 is the year before university. So it's when you get those kind of like really important grades. And I go into school, and I was like, right, I've got to really focus now. So I've gone from having the best days every single day, and I've come to school. And the first day, the teacher goes to me, if you don't get, we're going to give you a test in 2 weeks. If you don't pass it, we're going to kick you off the course. And I've always hated doors closing on myself. I like to see myself as like a high achiever or whatever, and try to be do the best I can. So the fact I'm now being told I'm going to get kicked off the course, and that means I potentially won't go to university, it played on my mind so much. I just couldn't believe it. So they were like, right, if you get a C on this test, you'll be able to carry on. Now, I had done no previous studying. I learned, my way of learning was bad, but I've got a really good short-term memory, but a really kind of bad long-term. So before exams, I would just cram it all in the month before, and then I get my grade. Usually works. GCSEs kind of got A's and stuff, so it did all right. But at this point, I mean, A-level was a different ball game. There's so much more stuff to kind of absorb, and they've just thrown this on me. So I was really, really stressed. I was panicking that this door of university was about to close on me. So for those 2 weeks, I went ham. Like, I revised as much as I could, 4 hours after school and stuff. The issue was, I'd go into school, and my friends would be like, Ollie, are you okay? Like, you look really stressed out. They could visibly see like something was wrong, and I was like, to be honest, no. Like, I was trying so hard to revise, and I was still getting grief from my teachers every single day, and I was like, just trying to get over this line. So it comes 2 weeks. Fast forward, I passed the test, but the kind of thing is, like, I passed the test, but at what cost? So I've passed the test, and the stress still hasn't gone. It's still there, and I'm really confused now, because kind of the source of the stress should be gone, but yeah, it was still there. And so bear in mind, I've gone from 10 out of 10 days to the absolute worst possible days, like, I've probably experienced in my life. So I've gone from the best to the absolute worst, and I've always said it's the contrast that's a killer. So it gets to the weekend, and I just need a break. My friends we arranged for a cinema. They brought some weed and stuff. So I was like, okay, I've not smoked in a while. Maybe it'll just relax me. So I smoked some, was fine. The next day, kind of felt a bit spaced out. And then this is when it all starts kicking off. So I go to the gym, and something in my mind was telling me, don't go tonight. Like, you just don't want to go. And I didn't really know what anxiety was or understand it. I didn't really understand stress or kind of depression. But it was telling me, just don't go to the gym. And as an act of stubbornness, I was like, I'm not going to yield to this. I'm going to the gym. So I went, and I'm working out as I usually do. And I look outside, and all of a sudden, I just go back to that time when I was in the toilet. Everything outside looked black. And my brain had just gone straight back to the point when I was in that toilet, and I was in a black void. And in my head, I've gone, I'm in a black void, and there's nothing else around me, and I'm just in this gym. And then I started panicking. And now I'm like, what on earth is going on? I'm not under any substance. I'm literally in the gym somewhere I usually feel safe, and I'm having a panic attack. And I just couldn't get over it. And it felt, the way it came on was so abrupt and sudden, and it just played on my mind constantly. So I carried on my session. I drove back home, and I woke up the next morning, and it was like I hadn't gone to sleep. It was like there's just a pause, and the thought continued. I still just couldn't comprehend what was going on in my brain and why I had that thought. And I felt really overwhelmed. But then this is kind of when everything just takes an absolute nosedive. And it's crazy to think, like, back in 5 years ago, this literally changed the direction of my life completely. So I'd gone into school, walking around my friend, still really thinking about what had happened. And I look across the playground and everything just suddenly goes 2D. And it sounds so bizarre, but it looked like that playground where I was looking at a postcard of it, or like a television screen. My brain just couldn't comprehend the fact it was 3 dimensions. And then obviously again, panic attack. So now I'm thinking I've had 3 panic attacks in the space of 2 days. I feel like an absolute wreck. The exams passed, but I feel awful. And now I've just seen the world in 2D. Like, what the fuck is going on with me? And I was literally got to the point where I took chemistry and biology as well. And I was in chemistry. My heart was going like through my chest, like literally felt like I could have a heart attack at any moment. My hands were dripping with sweat. I looked down at my book, lifted my hands off, and there was like handprints on my book, my textbook. I just couldn't put into words what it was like. And then I realised something is seriously wrong. And that stemmed the whole journey. And I went from that kind of in this zone of just like constant anxiety and stress and panic. And that continued for 2 weeks. I was seeing things I couldn't comprehend, things like in 2D. It was just so awful. And I was like, I've got to tell my parents about this. And my dad was always quite strict, so I was bricking it to tell him. And then I was sitting in the living room, like ready to tell him, and I was kind of thinking, should I do it, should I not? And then as I look over to the kind of coffee table, it looks 2D again. And I'm just like, I've got to tell him. So I walk in trepidatiously, like scared that he's going to absolutely have the biggest go at me. But that's the opposite of what I needed. I just needed someone to tell me it's going to be okay. So I walk in, and yeah, he tells me, he said it's okay. He looked at me kind of caringly and was like, we'll work out how to get over this. So like from the stance, I was so lucky in the sense I had such a good support group, my friends and my family. And we looked at what it was, and it was derealization, or what we found on the internet. It's called derealization. At the time, that didn't really mean much to me. I didn't know what it was stemmed from, what caused it. So I didn't know that was anxiety at first. I just knew it was derealization. And I also knew that when I looked it up, I felt worse the next few days. Like when I thought of it, I gave it power. And it was a vicious cycle that I was in of when I felt anxious over derealization, because of the situation I was in, I'd start feeling depressed. And then when I felt depressed, I wouldn't feel derealization. So I kind of wonder, why am I feeling depressed? And I'd feel good again. And then that would lead to anxiety, and it'd go back and forth. So it was a really horrible thing that I was involved in. And it was about 9 months I was in that kind of loop of derealization for. And after that, it kind of leads to a lot of other things, because once you live a certain way for a certain amount of time, you start comprehending things and that changes your belief system. And I had to go over that hurdle as well. So it was really awful. But then fast forward from that to the point I'm at now, which is when I realised actually everything I've gone through, if I was at that point where I was literally crippled, like I'd been from a confident boy to literally completely crippled to being confident and kind of aware again, then anyone can, literally anybody can. So I was like, right, I need to really knuckle down and help people out with this.
No, yeah, I mean that's definitely a tough story, but it's a good story, and like definitely helps set the stage for me. And I'm just curious, I mean, do you think back on it and wonder why it kind of came out of the blue like it did? Or like if you look back on your life, would you say, okay, you know, even when I was younger, I noticed that maybe I was anxious but just didn't realize it, and then I don't know what you think about the edible that you took, if that was like a trigger that just kind of carried over in conjunction with the stress. I don't know how you like look back on it, right? And it's definitely something that's really tough to go through, but you know, I would think you kind of wonder like, why did this happen all of a sudden, right?
100%. And you bang on pretty much. So there's a few things, and I've done a lot of reflecting, and obviously writing the book, I'm constantly going back to that place. So I'm always thinking, or often thinking about how it happened. And it's only recently I made a pretty like big breakthrough in what I think happened. But this bit I know for sure. So the way weed affects a young brain is completely different to how weed affects an older brain. So after the age of 25, if you were to smoke weed when your frontal lobes are already developed, you're going to be fine pretty much. Like it's very, very rare that you're going to go through anything like derealization. I mean, you might, but it's very, very rare. The issue is when you've got a young brain and you've got a very stressful scenario, and then you add weed into the mix, now you've got the perfect trifecta. And this together kind of forms a recipe for just like your complete mental breakdown. And what I looked at some studies. So in the book that I'm writing, I've looked at those case studies and how this came about. And then they found a lot of people, or they've seen people that smoke weed, there's been an increase in mental health issues, especially in young brains. So, okay, that got me thinking that's probably the reason what happened. I was very stressed from what was going on at school. I've gone from being completely happy the whole time to then, as I said, the contrast is a killer. The contrast has dropped off a cliff. I think that's what it was. I think the contrast and the change in levels definitely caused this. I think if I was drip feeded stress, it wouldn't have been as bad. But because I was used to such good times to that, it was just awful. But as you said, like kind of when you're younger, was there anything that could have triggered it? Now, at the time, and my brain must have just forgot about it, maybe it's like a way of coping mechanism, protection. Going through this and reflecting on everything like my life, I realised when I was in year 6, so when I was about 10 or 11 years old, that whole year, I felt sick. And I don't know why. I don't know what it was there. My parents thought I was getting bullied, but I wasn't. It was just completely out of the blue. I remember going to some restaurant. I ordered the biggest burger and the biggest milkshake, and I was so excited for it. The waitress put it down on the table. I picked it up, and as soon as I picked it up, my stomach sank, and I couldn't take a bite out of it. I just couldn't eat it. I just felt sick. And now, looking back, that was 100% anxiety. I was going through anxiety for a year, but I just didn't know what it was or what the feeling was, and I couldn't explain it. And I kind of got over that as the years went on. So my brain just thought there was no reason to remember it, so I forgot about it. But as you said, weed can be a trigger. The edibles could be a trigger, and weed has been known to trigger past events. So if you felt anxious growing up or had kind of something like that, weed can trigger it and kind of bring it back to fruition. And I think that's definitely what happened, as well as everything else.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of your research that you've done when writing the book too, and I've just kind of heard this, as hearsay, like on a podcast or whatever, that yeah, edible marijuana can hit you a lot harder, and it can trigger, if you have a family history of schizophrenia or other mental illnesses, right? It can trigger that and kind of be that thing that pushes you over the edge. So I don't know if you feel it was that way or if it played a smaller role. But yeah, I think you're definitely onto something, especially now too. I'll just make the comment that, and I don't know how it is in the UK, but in the United States, it's legal a lot of places. It's a lot stronger, right? The THC content is so much higher. It's not even comparable to what it was in the 1980s too. So I don't know if you think that plays a role at all, but it's like a completely different drug as well, I think is important to call out.
Yeah, definitely. And that is one thing I wrote about. So street weed is a lot different to like medicinal marijuana. So what I found was the THC content of the weed I was smoking, I think, was about 28%. Whereas if you go back into the 1970s, when kind of, like the hippies and that would smoke, it was a lot lower. And they were smoking strains that, I've seen it now, the strains that they were smoking, I see my friends smoke, and it had zero effect, like maybe the tiniest feeling of high. So the way they felt high was completely different to how it is now. And yeah, like the THC is what causes the hallucinating kind of feelings. And that being so high is 100% contributing to the factor of increased mental health. And funny you say, like the kind of thing with schizophrenia and stuff, when I was reading about it and I saw that's what could trigger, I was so scared that that's the route I was going down. That was the biggest thing playing on my mind. And I was like, I need to stop this thing before it becomes something irreversible. And that's one thing I was panicking about so much. The issue is, and it's kind of ironic, I'd never been or had an addictive personality, and I never would have done something or wanted to do something that I thought would affect me long term. The biggest effect I thought weed would do, because of how I saw it in pop culture and how promoted it was, I thought it would only affect your lungs. I literally thought, 'cause I had asthma, I thought the only reason my parents were angry at me is because it affects my asthma and will make that worse, which is why I didn't do it too often. But the opposite happened. It wasn't the physical side, it was the mental side. And it kind of hit me out of the blue, because that was something I didn't even realize was an effect. And it's kind of like I look back and I'm like punching myself a little bit, like I should have known. But the biggest thing, and this was the breakthrough kind of thing I had recently, I've been looking into GABA a lot, like as in the way our gut kind of plays in conjunction with our mind and our mental health. And I've heard the saying, like, the brain controls the body, but the gut controls the brain. And I've always wondered why. I don't know if you know this, and I only found out recently, and I can't believe it's not common knowledge, but 95% of our serotonin is made in our gut, and 50% of our dopamine is made in our gut. So with that in mind, imagine you've got a factory that's making Apple phones. So this is literally your money maker. And now imagine you give that factory no electricity, no water, no supplies. You're damaging what's creating the most like benefit for you. So this gut, we want it to be optimal. Surely, if we knew that it provided this much foundations to our mental health, then you want to eat the best food. You want to make sure it's tip top. But I didn't know this. I don't think many people knew this. And then I look back and I think, actually, what was happening in 2018? So I'd started the gym when I was in year 10, which was 2016. So I started eating the cleanest foods. I was going to the gym, but I was having protein shakes, which is very, very high in lactose. And I could have that. That was fine. All of a sudden, in about the end of 2017, I started not being able to have protein shakes. And this time I didn't realise, but it was causing me loads of stomach problems. I didn't know it was the protein shakes at first, so I kept doing them. And I did them up until 2018 summer. And so what I was doing was constantly having these protein shakes, destroying my gut, having really bad reactions to it, and it really destroyed it. And then I think, oh my God, I was like, I've completely destroyed my gut. 95% of my serotonin and obviously 90% of dopamine is coming from it. We know these chemicals have a massive contributing factor to how we feel. Serotonin is essentially our happy chemical, and we know it through antidepressants. It can really, the increase of it improves mental health. And dopamine is obviously our pleasure chemical, so without that, we're going to feel even worse. So I was like, shit. I was like, I literally destroyed something that's producing kind of the foundation to my mental health. So now add that to the mix, as well as the stress, the weed, all that kind of stuff. No wonder I was in such a bad situation.
Yeah, and I think going through this and all the research you've done, has it kind of changed your perception about mental health problems? Because I think you explained it really well. And I think, even I, when I was younger, had that perception as well. Like, it's just all in your head. It's just all in your head. That's the only problem. But no, it's like, okay, if you're not sleeping well, if you're not eating well, if you're constantly on social media, if you're stressed because of your exams, if you're drinking a lot or smoking a lot, it all contributes. So I don't know how long maybe it took you for that perspective shift, but is that kind of how you feel now, like seeing it holistically, or the entire picture of many different factors?
100%. I think our current environment now, especially in the West, is built around seemingly just to kind of pull away our mental health. It seems like we're destroying it in a way. I think there's a massive correlation between food and your mental health that we don't look at in the West at all. The same thing with internal inflammation. So through all the research I've done, internal inflammation can cause depression, anxiety. You get internal inflammation from the emulsifiers in food, the acidity regulators, the preservatives. They're really bad for it. These are all things we're consuming on a daily basis. Staring at social media, like you said, so bad for our dopamine cycle. Because our brain is kind of used to rewarding us for certain things by giving us dopamine. And that's kind of like back in the day, say if we were hunters and gatherers. One thing is our brain hasn't changed in 30,000 years. So the way our brain's set up when we're hunter and gatherer is kind of, you find water, you find food, you're rewarded. And these are all little rewards, but they're all natural. Whereas now, if we go on kind of to TikTok, the same brain that hasn't changed in 30,000 years has now got to adapt to constant pleasure, constant dopamine. So our brain's going dopamine for every TikTok video we see. We're getting so much, when we go off it, we're getting a massive low. So now instead of being kind of nice and regulated, we're getting these highs and these lows. So we're feeling really good, but then we're also feeling really, really bad. And when you're in that really bad low zone, that's when you're more inclined to get mental health issues too. So combine that with what you're eating, your internal inflammation, social media consumption, work you might have to do, the social pressures that we're under. All of these factors contribute, and your mind is getting torn apart. So it's a massive thing, like as you say, holistically, that we've got to look at. And I think you've got to really look at your life and how it's structured and improve every kind of element of it. For me now, I'll try to limit the amount of social media I have. Spend a certain amount of times walking, like just being outside, away from the digital side of things. I'll spend just 15 minutes meditating in the mornings, kind of ice bath. the ice baths are great for their own reasons. I mean, back in the day, we didn't need them, but I feel like in this scenario we're in now, they can be quite beneficial. But it's definitely changed my perspective. I had no understanding of mental health when I was 17 or when I was 18, but before everything happened. And then fast forward to now, I've really realised how it works. I think I did hypnotherapy, and that really, really helped me. And hypnotherapy taught me so much about how the mind works, and just like the way that we capture memories and associate them to the emotions we feel then, and then refer back to them going forward. But that's another topic.
Yeah. Maybe we can get into that in a minute. But I wanted to ask you, like, and you kind of touched on it a bit, but what do you recommend doing? Because I totally relate to everything you're saying. But I think the reality of our world is, right, like right now we're communicating through technology, right? I do a podcast. You promote your coaching business on X and Twitter. So it's just really funny to me because I think there are a
Yeah.
lot of downsides of social media, but then we're also doing really good things as well. Or, you have the opportunity to grow a business. And I think just generally, right, like TikTok's not going anywhere. Instagram's not going anywhere. There's fast food on every corner. It's not going anywhere. And so, you may have to eat McDonald's every once in a while. So I don't know if you have or how you coach people, like what your perspective is around balance, right? Because I think you're right, but I think you also can't just like shut yourself inside and say, I'm not going out into the world. It's just set up to make me miserable. So I don't know if your thoughts on that, right? It's hard to do, but it's just the modern world we live in today.
I mean, well, that's the reality of the situation. Some that are great in the word balance. We can't get rid of TikTok. We can't get rid of Instagram. Ironically, that is where we're promoting our platforms because it's the best place to do it. I mean, everyone's there, and the opportunities it opens. It is crazy. But yeah, it's balance. I mean, yeah, like you said, there's McDonald's. I've not had McDonald's in like years. Of course, I've had it a few times this month, but like it's moderation. So when I eat when I eat healthy, or it's not even healthy, I'll eat foods that are high in probiotics and prebiotics, which are really good for the gut, like kimchi, oats, anything kind of like fermented foods, Greek yogurt. They're really good for the gut. And obviously, occasionally when I do want a treat, I'll get a McDonald's. But it's not about having McDonald's every single day because that's giving your gut no breaks. With TikTok and Instagram, it's moderation. I mean, I was on TikTok and I thought I was on there for 10 minutes. I looked at my screen time and it was 49 minutes, and I was thinking, shit, that went back so quick. So one good way is kind of just setting like a reminder or something to stop what you're doing, like kind of just remind you that you've been on this for a while, on the app for a while. You can do it, like there's apps that you can do that with that will kind of monitor your screen time and alert you when you've gone over a certain amount. And then, what I was going to say, there's another point I was going to go back to, but I think it's escaped me now.
It's
Forgot.
all good. Yeah. We'll see if it comes back to you. But maybe you could just kind of expand on that too. Like, I think it's really important when kids are young, right? When you're like 12, 13, 14, or 15, right? Like, that's when you need a mentor, you need help. So what do you recommend to those younger kids and those that are starting to say, oh crap, yeah, I mean, I am stressed. There's a lot of social media. I don't know what to do with my life, right? I think you need to catch it there. Is that kind of your goal in targeting people, or are you also working with older people in their 20s and 30s? Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess the people I'm gonna go for is more kind of my age range. It's like say 18 to like 30, between that age. But definitely for young kids, my advice would be um, limit. Well, it's more for the parents' responsibility to limit the amount they
Mm.
consume on their phones. Like, kind of keep an eye on it. Obviously, it's hard when you get between like 16 and 18 years old. And I guess the 16 to 18 years old bracket, especially 16 to like 21, it's where we change the most. And that's where I do try push the kind of the message about weed and smoking and kind of the drugs and stuff. I mean, sometimes I see it as a blessing in disguise. What happened, because I was close to doing other things as well. Like my friends were exploring, and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll jump on that too. And then after that, kind of what happened, I completely stopped all of it. I was like, no, not going near anything. So that's what I kind of see as a blessing. But I mean, some kids might go through and follow through with it, and they might do something even like worse, like that could affect them even greater. So it's kind of finding those kids and just making them aware on what actually happens. Like the biggest thing with me, when I wasn't aware with what actually would happen or could happen smoking weed, like what was the effects. I thought, oh, mental health issues if you smoke weed. Yeah, that's like 1 in a million. But the reality is it's not. Most of my friends stopped smoking weed in the end because they started feeling anxious and having panic attacks. They luckily stopped it before anything got worse and they were fine. But I was kind of unlucky. So it's kind of explaining to them and pushing the message of this is what it's doing. This is the kind of stuff they put on the streets. And then this is what you're consuming and this is the effect it could have. I think that's one thing as well. Like with the book that I'm writing, I've actually thought a bit, I want my own children to read the book just so they know what I went through and to really kind of put them off, or maybe not even just put them off, but just make them aware what could happen if they do go ahead with it. So I think the biggest thing is awareness.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And so it kind of taught you to not go back to it. And you recommend, right, if you're young, just stay away from it, which I think is easier said than done, right? And you just talked about it. I think some people, you just need to learn trial by error. And hopefully, it's not maybe as severe as what you experienced, but it's kind of like when you find out for yourself, you say, okay, I'm not doing that again, right? Which
yeah, I mean, like you said, we learn our lessons by kind of finding out by ourselves. Like people can tell us as much as we want. I mean, people told me a lot of things and I'd still go ahead and do it. And it was only when I got bit back that I realized, oh, actually, maybe they were right. And it's like my parents kept telling me, well, don't drink too much alcohol. And then, I drank quite a lot of alcohol and then woke up the next day feeling awful and throwing up that before. And I was like, okay, maybe they were right. Like, I shouldn't have. And it's one of those where in hindsight, if we just listened to people around us, we could avoid so much mistakes. But the reality is we usually want to find out for ourselves. I did just think on the alcohol point, actually, I just wanted to mention this with alcohol and the way it works. So if you feel really anxious, there's a lot of people that kind of suffer from anxiety and depression. When they drink alcohol, they feel a lot better in the moment. And it's actually because alcohol mimics GABA receptors. So GABA is what controls our nervous system and balances depression and anxiety and helps us from perceiving threatening situations as threatening. So we actually deal with them appropriately. And obviously anxiety is seeing normal things and seeing them as threatening. So this is a really important part of our body. So alcohol, in the moment of drinking, alcohol will mimic the GABA receptor so that you feel really good because you're getting really high amounts of GABA. And it's only until the next morning when you get anxiety is when your body has a withdrawal of GABA. And then that's when you feel anxiety, and that's when the mental health issues can occur, like schizophrenia. So that's one big thing as well. So when I was going through those 3 months of anxiety and depression, like a lot of people that don't know what happens or what they're going through they resort to alcohol. So I started looking forward to the weekends and just drinking loads on Friday and Saturdays. I did this for 3 months. And what I was doing was making my situation thousands of times worse because I thought, oh, this will make me feel better. These are the times I feel good. And then what I was actually doing was destroying the GABA receptors, withdrawing the GABA, so making the way I perceive the world even worse than what I already was at the time. So that's one thing as well. With that kind of, if you're going through something like this, the best thing to do is avoid alcohol until you feel better.
Yeah, and maybe you could expand on how you did that, right? Because I think it's easier said than done, especially when people develop habits. Like you said, you're doing it for 3 months, drinking on the weekends. Like, how do you just say, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore? Because it can really become entrenched in your life where, your social circles, you drink with the same people, they're your friends, you see them all the time. So I don't know if you have any advice or experience, like how you kind of get away from that over time and develop more healthy habits and
100%.
make a sustainable change.
Yeah, so it's systems. So first off, obviously people say like bad friends can, have bad influences, and not necessarily that your friends that drink are bad at all. They're just being kind of 18, 19-year-old kids. But you want to take yourself out of the situation. I mean, if you're in that situation every time, you're a lot more likely to then kind of join in. And it's hard not to. I mean, I've been in that situation. I kind of would try and get non-alcoholic drinks and like hide the fact it was non-alcoholic. So I just wanted to feel involved. So it is completely hard, but you've got to remove yourself from the situations that you think can put you like in the kind of in a vulnerable position. Discover the triggers. So you want to notice what triggers it. So is it maybe sometimes, are you bored? Like when you're really bored, you're low on dopamine. So your brain kind of goes back to what it goes through, all the things that it knows will give you dopamine. So then if it realizes, if there's already a system in your brain to like set up in place where it knows if it gets alcohol, it's going to get X amount of dopamine, then when you're really bored and you feel kind of really bad or low, your brain's going to go drink this, you'll feel better. And that happens a lot, and that's what gets a lot of people out. So you've got to kind of think in your routine. Like say if you're working 9 to 5, you're occupied. There could be a Friday night where you realize all your friends are going out and you're staying inside. you're not going to feel great. So you've got to try to set something up. Maybe do something with your parents, with your girlfriend. Try to set up these like hobbies. Hobbies probably the best thing, like sports. Give yourself an end goal. I put something up where it's like just to try to achieve a 10K run. So I was working towards that because my brain was focused on that. There was like nothing kind of going to get in my way. But there's a lot of statistics about how habits are formed and how they're destroyed. So I'm pretty sure it's been a while since I've gone back to these statistics, but it takes averagely 66 days to perform new behavioural patterns, and it's 20. I think it's 28 days to form a new habit, and it can take 66 days to remove those behavioural patterns. So you've got to kind of think on the end goal as well. So having those days kind of in line, if you know that your habits or your addictions, they can be gone in 66 days because that's when kind of your brain molds through neuroplasticity. It literally changes shape. Then you've got something to aim for. So now you've got, it's not going to be forever. You've got X amount of time where you can prep for, plan the schedule, locate the triggers, and that's probably what I'll do.
Yeah, and I don't know if you resonate with this at all, but like the way I like to think about it too is like it could take years, right? You mentioned months. So yeah, you're going to see some progress in months, but I think you may like fall off the wagon. But I think just moving in the right direction is what you want to shoot for, right? If you, let's just say you drink 5 days a week and you say, okay, I've gotten it down to only 2 days a week. And then eventually no days a week, and you make it 3 weeks without drinking, and then you drink. I think it's important not to beat yourself up, right? Like all you do is just start from there, and then you just keep going. It's people say, "Oh, I drank, I failed." It's like you only failed if you fall completely back into the old habit, not the new habit. So I don't know if you use that at all when coaching people, and trying to develop new habits and overcoming anxiety.
100%, and I've got like some quite good advice for this, and it's what kind of I learned as well. There's a reason why. There's a part of you that wants to do whatever you're doing. So say you've got an addiction, say you're addicted to alcohol, and then you're doing really well for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you give in. Like you said, you've not suddenly, it's not ended. It's not like, oh God, I've given in again, it's over now, like completely relapsed. There's part of you that wants or seeks alcohol. So I think the best thing to do is don't beat yourself up about it. Learn about yourself. Learn that part of you that wanted alcohol and learn why it wanted it. When you start looking into these reasons and looking into why you wanted it, you can start kind of discovering the trauma. And then, so instead of being that part about you, because that part of yourself is always there and you're just hating yourself. If you're saying, oh, why did I do that? It's just putting hate on yourself, which then will probably make you more likely to do it again. So you want to look at it in a positive view, kind of tend to it, give it some like motherly care. And then by looking at that, you can kind of find the reason why you went and opted for the alcohol again. And then just keep kind of reminding yourself, it's okay. Like if there was some traumatic experience that happened before that you're now free from, to remind yourself that you're free from that now. And kind of just, just get yourself out through love rather than hate. Because I don't think if you do it through the hate, it's going to be a really hard time.
Yeah, I think you make a good point on that too. And I mean, just life in general, like if something doesn't go your way or you make your mistake and you just beat yourself up, that just kind of creates a negative feedback loop in the wrong direction, where you did something wrong, you beat yourself up about it, so you feel bad that you beat yourself, and then you just continue to beat yourself up, right? So it just pushes you in the wrong direction, as opposed to
100%.
like, made a mistake, okay, just gonna start from here now and just keep going in the right direction, right? I'm curious too, so maybe we could shift a little bit. Like, it sounds like you've researched this a ton, you've tried a bunch of different things, and I don't know if it'll be this simple, but maybe you can kind of quantify or say, like for anybody listening to this, like where to start or what's the strongest lever to pull from an anxiety perspective based on all the things you tried. And you mentioned some of them: diet, sleep, hypnotherapy, meditation, etc. So I don't know if you could give that advice, like start here, what is it?
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's why I created a video course, and that's kind of the question I asked myself. There's all these different things, how to piece them together. So I split them into 3 sections. So the first section is healing, the second section is reprogramming, and then the last section is managing. So if you're just starting to feel like you're going through the anxiety journey, or you're feeling really overwhelmed, the first place you want to do is where you get the quick wins, the instant results, where you can manage it. So when you go to the managing section, where this is the day-to-day stuff, this is your ice baths, your meditation, breath work, all this kind of stuff. So ice baths are great because they increase your dopamine by 250%. That can last up to 3 hours. Contrast this to like a chocolate bar or something. You get the same increase of dopamine, but it lasts 10 minutes. So as painful as ice baths are, they're so good in this perspective. The next thing is anxiety works kind of like by fight or flight. A lot of the feeling you're getting is just a fight or flight response, where it's an increase in adrenaline. So ice baths then will increase adrenaline by 500%. So basically, you think it probably sounds bad at first, which I did as well, and then I kind of looked into it and did it myself. You get a 500% increase of adrenaline in that moment. So you're getting to the ice bath, your adrenaline spikes through the roof, but it's in a controlled environment. And then what happens is the rest of the day, when you feel a fight or flight response, your body's not got adrenaline to kind of go to. So you're getting like a really reduced amount of adrenaline, and therefore it's reducing the feeling of anxiety. So that's one thing. That's what I do. I do ice baths or cold exposure every single day, and it helps like ridiculous amounts. It's just guaranteed to feel good at the start of the day, basically. The next thing is meditation. And the biggest thing you can go wrong here is by doing it for and I'm going to do an hour straight away. It's just not going to work. It's too much focus, and you're going to find yourself just wasting your time, basically. Just start off with 5 or 10 minutes and search up. Obviously, you can't go through it now, but it's mindfulness meditation. Essentially, it's closing your eyes and just focusing on something. Usually, it's your breath. Just keep focusing your breath. You will think of things. Thoughts will pass. Just notice them. Let them pass in your mind. I just think of the word thinking, and then I go back to the breath and just keep going back. And eventually, after time, in those 5 or 10 minutes, you'll realize that you're not getting these thoughts come up, and then you'll be able to do longer and longer and longer. So I do 15 minutes. I'm going to try and go up to about half an hour soon. So that's that. Breath work is also another thing. So if you look at box breathing, that's really good for coping when you're feeling overwhelmed in emotion. So say you're outside, maybe you've got social anxiety. Breath work like box breathing is really good to just reduce yourself. I would say oxygen. Oxygen is kind of like similar to a fire, the way it works with us. So if you've got oxygen with a fire, it accentuates the fire. If you've got oxygen when you're feeling panicky, it's going to accentuate the panic. So by breathing and slowing down your breathing, you're suffocating your body of oxygen, and then it's forced to reduce your heart rate. I think it's through the vagal. I think it's called the vagal vagus nerve, and then through the reduction of the heart rate, you then feel calm again. So you can't be panicky with a low heart rate. You can only start panicking with a high heart rate. So if you control the heart rate, you control the panic. So that's the managing aspect. The next thing you want to look at, and this is the biggest thing, is why you're feeling like this in the first place. So a lot of the time it can be trauma. For me, it was drug-induced PTSD, which was from the experience I had on the weed brownies, and it kind of stuck. And this is when hypnotherapy was really, really good, because hypnotherapy taught me how the mind actually works. What we'll do is we'll take snapshots of our scenarios, and we'll associate them with emotion. So for instance, say 30,000 years ago, we're hunting a tiger. We see a tiger get absolutely mauled. We get mauled by the tiger, but we manage to survive. Our brain's taken that memory and associated it with loads and loads of negative emotions to protect us, essentially. So that when we see a tiger again, we don't think, oh, we're going to go hunt it again because it's going to kill us. So as a use of survival, our brain then goes, no, this is what happened last time. It goes through the file and catalogue of memories, realizes this is what a tiger done to me, and then it paralyzes you in anxiety. So as a form of survival to keep you safe, that's what it does. So now we know it's just kind of a survival mechanism. Now we've got to try and see how can we process these emotions properly. This is like EMDR therapy. EMDR therapy is so good for these situations, because the way EMDR therapy works is it manually processes these traumatic memories. So when you have a good memory, say you go to a theme park with your parents, you love it, that memory will just join the network of memories. You'll have some dreams about it the next few weeks, and it joins the good network, happy days. But when you have a negative scenario, so say like with the tiger, it quarantines that memory. So as a form of protection, your brain goes, right, I'm going to put this memory over here, away from the good network, to protect you. So the issue is, you feel fine until you see that tiger again. It feels like you're reliving that experience. So it will just suddenly go bang, and it's fresh. And that's why when you have like PTSD, it feels like you're reliving it again. So EMDR therapy is really, really good for processing that memory manually. So what it does is kind of unblocks the drain. So it's so bizarre. It works by the bilateral stimulation of your eyes, and it's thought to replicate REM sleep. So you'll kind of go to somebody, a doctor or whoever was trained in EMDR therapy. You'll think of the memory. You engulf yourself in it, feel those emotions like rife. They'll literally move their finger like this, just left to right, and you'll keep your neck still, and you'll just follow it with your eyes. So it's the bilateral stimulation of your eyes. So you just keep following it. You'll do this for 20 minutes. about 6 to 12 sessions, and then your brain will process that. It kind of unclogs the pipe, so your brain then kind of processes the memory, and then it starts doing its own processing. So when you unclog the pipe, the water will go through and start getting filled essentially. So the next 2 weeks you'll have nightmares, but that's just your brain processing the memory. And then what you'll find is that you could think back to the tiger situation, and all of a sudden when you see a tiger, you feel nothing. You don't feel paralyzed, you don't feel any anxiety, you just feel fine. And this is a lot of the time what's causing the anxiety that we're not aware of. It's these little traumatic memories kind of we've picked up throughout our life that haven't been dealt with. So EMDR therapy is great for that. Hypnotherapy is great for kind of reprogramming like the way you feel about things. It basically puts your brain into theta state. So a trance that you get put in is basically just theta state. It's when your brain waves go between 4 to 7 hertz. So basically you can speak to your subconscious. Your subconscious is a lot more susceptible to listen to. It's a lot more susceptible to be spoken to. So things that you say really stick. So hypnotherapy will put you in a trance state, theta state, and then the hypnotherapist will start saying things like affirmations or things you want to feel so that you can really start believing that. So say if you go to hypnotherapy and you get put in a trance, they could say, you feel good. Say you're trying to quit smoking, you'd be like, you don't like smoking, you realise that it's not worth it. Your subconscious listens to this, and then that will really help with your day-to-day life too. And that would be the healing way. And then the reprogramming is essentially the convincing, it's throwing yourself now into the real world and then kind of like reprogramming on the basis of what you've done. So say you've now healed, you've still got to kind of say, like for me, I didn't like driving far away. So say I've now healed from hypnotherapy or EMDR therapy from driving far away, but now I've actually got to go do it. So I go do it, and like my brain I'm used to those negative emotions, so I'm kind of looking for it. But through kind of the self exposure therapy, through doing it like over and over again, you kind of then learn to relearn that it's okay. So you do reprogramming, is like self-hypnosis. So kind of telling yourself things over and over again. Again, your subconscious listens to everything you say. So that's why you don't want to have any negative self-talk. Exposure therapy, so going and doing the thing you don't like doing over and over again. There's something I call a Foster-based questioning, which is my own kind of technique that I developed when I was driving far away. I realised when I could feel a panic attack coming on, I could defeat it with logic. So the reason we feel anxious is basically, if you think about anxiety, it's just the fear of something that hasn't happened yet. And we only feel fear as a protection from death. So the question is, if you're not in danger and you know you're not in danger, there's no reason to feel anxious by extension because you're not in danger of dying. So I'll be driving and I feel anxious and I can feel myself getting a panic attack. So I'll use all the thought I can muster up and just ask myself a closed-ended question. And the first question is always, am I in danger? And when I look around and be like, okay, I'm driving, I'm not in danger. Okay, no, I'm not in danger. So I feel a bit better. So I'm like, okay, right, let me ask another question. This is another closed-ended question, but it's more specific to your scenario. So mine would be, I'm driving, I love camping. So I'd look around and be like, would I camp here? It's all countryside in the UK. So I'm like, look around, yeah, I would camp here. I've got a tent in the car. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm safe. If I'm not in danger and I'd camp here, I could pull over and just relax at any point. And that's how I deal with it. So that's my own one. But yeah, so you've got healing, reprogramming, and managing. And then they all have their own little framework.
No, I think it sounds like you have a great system. And one thing I want to call out too, because you mentioned a lot of these things, but I think, the stuff you do on your own, whether it's like breath work or meditation or changing your diet or better sleep, I think, and let me know if you agree, this is something you're going to be doing essentially like in perpetuity. So make sure it's one, sustainable, and that there's balance, but like you can't just say, okay, I'm going to meditate a couple times and then I'm going to be good to go. Right. Like it's kind of like a forever thing. Right. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's your lifestyle now. So the managing part, yes, I should probably have said the managing part of this is your lifestyle. This is your day-to-day stuff. And yeah, you can't just do it one time. You're kind of, the best way to look at it is your brain as a muscle. So when you meditate, you're essentially training the muscle. It's like going to the gym to train arms. If you go to the gym a few times a week, maybe leave it for a few months, do you think your arms are going to grow? They're not. They're going to kind of, maybe you feel a bit of a pump and then they'll stay the same. But if you go to the gym every single day and just do, say, 20 minutes on arms every single day, by the end of that year, your muscles, it will be bulging. If you're having the right foods, it'll be really big. So it's the same thing with the brain. If you just meditate every day and just keep it up, like say 5, 10, 30 minutes, and then you stay at 30 minutes every single day, your brain's going to be so strong now and so kind of well formed, that it's going to be so powerful, and it's definitely something you need to do day to day. Same with the kind of the ice baths. If you can maintain the ice baths every single day, then you're also guaranteeing yourself, a strong start to the day as well. The EMDR therapy stuff and the hypnotherapy, that is a bit more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really, that's not something you do day to day. That would be something kind of, obviously you want to go through kind of like the person you're doing it with. EMDR therapy, they need to be trained in. Hypnotherapy, it's not so much. But that would be something kind of you'd do once a week, and then once every 2 weeks, and then once a month. And because that's something that's healing you. It's not meant to be there all the time. But the reprogramming stuff is self-hypnosis, like affirmations. That's something you need to practice doing every day. So it's just positive self-talk. It's only going to improve you more, improve your mindset more. And exposure therapy, like I do find this, if you push the boat out, you can keep pushing it further and further and further. But when you do stop pushing the boat out, it does seem that the boat starts to come back in a little bit. So, for instance, I drove like 4 hours away, and I felt like I already pushed the boat out. Then I flew somewhere, then I flew to another country, and I felt like really strong. And I was like, I could go to like another continent, wherever, I'd feel fine. I left it about a year, and then all of a sudden, it felt like a bigger challenge now to even just drive 4 hours away. So you have got to keep maintaining these things and kind of exposing yourself to your wants, fears, so they don't come back in.
Yeah, 100%. No, I totally agree with you. I'm curious too, like maybe you could share without like divulging too much personal information, but I'm curious like what you've learned from coaching people, right? And the types of people that approach you for help with a mental health condition or anxiety, right? Because I think just in general, or maybe at least for me when I was younger, right? Like you assume that everyone else around you has everything put together, and maybe it doesn't have to do with mental health or anxiety. But I think as you get older, you realize that everyone has their own struggles or problems that they're facing, right? Like it's not a good assumption to say, oh, so and so, he's just everything's going perfectly. I mean, you don't really know that. So I don't know if the coaching specifically has helped you realize that, or maybe if you realize that through your journey. But just a point I wanted to call out.
100%. Yeah, it's the people you least expect. The people you think have it all worked out or are absolutely fine or really relaxed. They could be the ones that are suffering in silence. I think everyone's gotten so accustomed to keeping a poker face that it's really hard to tell. I think one of my first clients was, I think about a year and a half ago, was my best mate, and he had been smoking weed for ages, and I told him, like, this is what I've gone through, you should stop. He kept doing it, and he was a really, really relaxed guy. And then he told me, he was like, mate, yesterday I had a panic attack over nothing, didn't know what was going on. And then I helped him out, and he always seemed really relaxed, and nothing fazed him. Another person was one of my good mates. I thought he was just had everything worked out, was really relaxed, and I found out he'd been going through something for 5-6 years, just behind closed doors. And it's just, you really can't tell. One thing that I have learned from this kind of cold outreach is men don't want to tell you their problems at all, and I can see why. It's perceived as being weak. If you tell someone you've got a kind of mental health problem, or you're struggling with mental health, from the perceived looking back, it looks weaker compared to somebody who supposedly doesn't. The thing is, usually both people do. One of them's just hiding it better than the other. With men, it's usually 1 in 3 people that are suffering, and I've spoken to hundreds of men, and it's only at first none of them have anything. So you think, well, it's 1 in 3, so one of you's got to have something wrong, and none of them do. But the more you get to speak to them, the more they kind of open up, actually, yeah, I'm going through this, and so it's rightly so. People don't want to divulge straight away into their personal problems, but once you do kind of build that trust relationship, they start to kind of open up, and you realize everyone's suffering with something. It's more rare that they're not.
And how do you think about that in terms of that, okay, that's a good point, but why should we think it should be any different, right? Life, I think, regardless of your background, is hard for everyone, right? And so where do you draw the line of hey, this is divulging? And it sounds like with your story, right, it was very severe and real problem to, hey, yeah, you have to work a job, you have to put food on the table. These are just the the trials and stresses of life. Do you ever think about that, like where you draw the line of like, hey, yeah, this is, I mean, if you think about our parents or people that grew up, you know, whenever World War II or whatever it was, the Great Depression, I mean, these things just happen. So I don't know if you think about that at all. Like, how do you distinguish those two pieces?
I think, yeah, no, like back in the day, I've thought about it before. I think back in the day, they had the same struggles as us, and sometimes it even looked harder. But if we look at third world countries, they're usually the ones that seem to be suffering the most. They're usually the happiest, like naturally. I think there's a few reasons for that. First off, like we go back to GABA and our stomachs, they're having organic food. The next thing is the biggest thing: the social relationships they have are actual genuine relationships, and they're interacting with people constantly. Whereas we're talking over phones and we're texting, something we've never done like before as a human race, that we're now got accustomed to. And I think there's definitely forces at play that we don't fully understand. That when you are with somebody, you feel the warmth of it. Like even if you just by being in someone's presence, you feel kind of energized from it. And a great example of this is during COVID. We spoke to people every day through our phones, through on Xbox, PS4, video calls. But how many people felt depressed or just in poor but worse mental health because of that lack of social interaction? If we still got the social interaction that we were meant to have, like through phones and stuff, we feel fine. But that's why I think there's definitely forces at play. So they had that, and then I think they also didn't have the phones technology either. But if we look to now, yeah, it is just life. Like we're going through so much, but I don't think what we've got set up as our life is necessarily healthy. And I also think people haven't been taught, especially in schools. I think there should be some kind of like wellness lesson, just so that people kind of have some tools to rely on when inevitably they do feel poor mental health. Because at work, I mean, if you look at work's only it seems like it's getting more stressful. Taxes are getting higher. The disparity between the poor and the rich is getting bigger. So it seems like there's constant pressures all the time, and it just feels like you've got nothing to go back on. You're the way that we're dealing with our brains working as like a pleasure structure. So like when you get your dopamine from what you're taking your dopamine from, it doesn't seem natural. And I think that's why it's going, like everyone's feeling it, because the way, I don't know, it's the way we're living just doesn't seem to be, it's not energizing us, it's taking energy away from us. And I think that's the biggest thing, and that's why everyone's kind of realizing something's going on. So I don't think there needs to be a line drawn with anything, to be honest. I think if someone's suffering like this, like, oh, like, you know, I'm feeling bad at work or whatever, it's getting really stressful. Okay, let's look at how we can deal with the stress. Let's just do a few techniques, because in most cases, people don't have a clue on like how to kind of defend. I was described as a beast. They don't have a clue on how to defend themselves against a beast. Just like I did when I was 18, that was the biggest thing. I didn't have a clue on how to defend myself against this beast, and that's the biggest thing. Like if people kind of knew, oh, I'll just do this, like I'll just do this breathwork technique to calm down at work. I'll meditate every morning to give myself that kind of strength. I feel like meditation is so taboo. Like when I actually speak kind of out of the circle on the internet I'm with and speak to people at work, they kind of look at me strange, like, oh, you meditate in the morning, that's weird. And it's actually like, it's not this taboo subject, or it shouldn't be at least. It's scientifically proven to benefit your mind and your day and stuff like this. So it's these techniques. I don't think there's a line drawn. It's just kind of making people aware of these techniques so that they have something to fall back on when they do inevitably some point feel stressed or bad.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think ignorance can hurt you, right? Or this, I think I had a friend that
100%.
used to, you know, ignorance is bliss, they say, but it not really, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't know how to help yourself. I mean, like in this scenario specifically. So, I think it was a great conversation. Maybe like as we kind of come to a close here, I know you're writing a book too. Maybe you can touch on what's going to be included in that book. I'm curious, like why you chose to write a book as well. It seems like it'd be a big undertaking, and what your goals are with it.
Yeah, for sure. So the book was actually the first thing that I decided to do before anything. And it was the book that led me on to X and kind of like deciding to coach and do all that kind of stuff. It was when I was flying to Italy with my girlfriend, and I was kind of thinking, I was like, right, I used to hate flying as well. That was another thing. I did like a flying course to try and get over it, and it did really, really help. And I was like, that's when I was sitting on the plane, and I was like, right, I need to do something to make the time go fast. It seems like when I work and I really kind of like focus, time goes really quick. So I was like thinking like, okay, what could I work on? And then everyone kind of told me, you should write about your experience or what happened. And I was like, okay, that'd be quite a good idea. I'll write a little bit, like maybe just to start and just see where it goes. And then, so I started writing on the plane, and I did about 4,000. Well, no, I think it was about 2,000 words. And then, yeah, I was like, I need to keep doing this, and I just kept doing it, writing and writing more and more. And then it got to the point where I was at like 15,000 words, and I was like, I need to actually make this into something. And then I just kept going, and now I'm at about 40,000 words, and I was like, that. I think when I was at 15,000, I was like, right, yeah, I need to finish to make a book. I got to about 20,000, and I was like, is what I'm writing even good? Like, have I just been writing absolute shit this whole time? So I got a few people to read it, and they kind of like, they were like surprised. They're like, this is actually really, really good. And I was like, oh, cheers for being surprised. But yeah, it was reassuring to see. And then I was like, okay, cool, let me just carry on with it. So I did it and kept going and going and going. I would have liked to have it done by now, but what I found was when you are going back to places of trauma, you do feel a bit weird the next few days. Like I kind of felt, I don't know, you feel a bit. I describe it as like you're going back to these scars and you're kind of cleaning the dirt out of them by revisiting them. But even though you've cleaned the dirt out, those scars still have to re-heal. So you've got to kind of nurse yourself a little for the next few days and just be a bit, I don't know, you feel a bit fragile. So I'll write a bit, I'll try to do as much as I can, and then kind of just focus on feeling or like letting those emotions come to play, because they're coming back to, they've risen to the surface. So it's just letting them kind of settle back down properly this time. So I've got to 40,000 words. I'm hoping to get my first draft done this year. And then once I've got the draft done, I'll kind of get it read by a few people. And my dream, I'd absolutely love it, would be if it was published properly and I could get it on Audible or something like that.
No, hey, very cool. Hey, how about, once you get it published, I'll bring you back on and you can talk about it and, where people
Right,
can buy
that's
it.
it.
But I think that's an awesome goal. And hey, I want to just thank you for taking the time. I thought it was a really good conversation, important conversation. I love how you just kind of lay your whole story out there. I think it'll really help a lot of people, and you already are through coaching and everything you're doing. So definitely want to say I appreciate that. And I'll give you the floor. Where can people find you if they want to reach out and connect and need help and want to inquire about coaching?
Thank you, man. And also, yeah, thanks for giving me the platform to speak on it. I think telling your story and being vulnerable is the best way for people to actually just kind of open up to you, because if you're not vulnerable with them, then why should they be vulnerable to you? So kind of laying out, I think it's the best thing to do. I would say if the book does get published, I'd absolutely love to come back on again. It's been a pleasure. I can be found on Instagram, X first. So X is my main kind of platform. It's Oliver_Foster_. My Instagram is Olly Foster Health. It would be Olly Foster on Twitter or X, but I couldn't get the handle, so we had to settle.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my two main platforms that you can find me on.
Awesome. Ollie, thanks so much. I'll link both those socials down below so people can find you. Again, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.